We're going to talk about the female reproductive system, and in addition to all of the functions that we discussed in the male reproductive system, the female reproductive system also has to be able to maintain a developing fetus as well, so provide a favorable environment for the developing fetus that would take place in the uterus, as well as being able to deliver that offspring to the outside environment. And so oogenesis would be analogous to spermatogenesis. And in spermatogenesis, we saw one diploid spermatogonia developing into four haploid genetically different spermatozoa, right? So we go from one diploid, four haploid, all genetically different. With oogenesis, we are going to go from one diploid oogonia, which would be the stem cell, to just one viable haploid genetically different daughter cell. So in spermatogenesis, we get four haploid genetically different daughter cells, right? In oogenesis, we only get one viable haploid genetically different daughter cell, which would be the oocyte capable of fertilization. And I'll discuss that more later on. Okay, so oogenesis, a portion of it will take place before birth of the female, then it arrests until the onset of puberty, then it will continue until about menopause, whereas spermatogenesis has the ability to take place in the seminiferous tubules the entire life from puberty on in males. Oogenesis will completely stop with the onset of menopause, and that time will depend on the particular woman. And so oogenesis, this process takes place in the gonads of the female, which are the ovaries, which would be analogous to the testes in the male. The sex hormones, same sex hormones, FSH and LH from the anterior pituitary gland. FSH is going to stimulate when it's released during the onset of puberty. It will stimulate the development and the enlargement of the reproductive organs, especially the ovaries. It stimulates follicle development within the ovaries. And the follicle cells are the cells that surround a developing oocyte and maintain the developing oocyte, as well as produce sex hormones. And so FSH, follicle stimulating hormone, will stimulate the follicles, and it causes the release, the follicular cells in the ovaries to produce a steroid hormone called estrogen. And then that estrogen will help maintain the reproductive cycle of the female, which happens on a monthly, about average 28-day cycle, as well as it's the feminizing hormone. So any female characteristics that you think of, as far as widening of the hips, deposition of adipose throughout the body, any female development of breast, mammary tissue, so on and so forth. Testosterone is the male hormone, which testosterone, we talked about how it stimulates the Sertoli cells to initiate spermatogenesis and the spermatogonia, but testosterone is also the masculine hormone, which would be responsible for the secondary characteristics of a male: deepened voice, body hair, increased muscle mass, all of that. Luteinizing hormone, this hormone actually, I'll talk about luteinizing hormone, stimulates a structure in the ovaries called the corpus luteum, which is what's left behind after ovulation. So luteinizing hormone causes ovulation, as well as causes that corpus luteum that's left over to produce a steroid hormone called progesterone. And progesterone will be responsible for maintaining the endometrial lining for possible implantation of a fertilized zygote. And so this is showing you oogenesis, right? And how it relates to the follicle development, okay? So this is showing you the development of the follicular cells that surround the developing oocyte, which would be this pink cell in the center, okay? So this shows, I like this diagram because it shows you what takes place before birth, then it arrests during childhood, and then the onset of puberty, it picks back up. And so here's our oogonium, which is our stem cell. It's diploid. You can see it says 2N in the center. Now this cell, since it's a stem cell, it's capable of undergoing mitosis and making genetically identical copies of itself. But all of the oogonia that's in the ovaries of the developing female before birth, all of the oogonia will begin oogenesis and develop or partially differentiate and become a primary oocyte. So that means that no oogonia cells will be left behind. So all of the stem cells develop into a primary oocyte. No stem cells left behind, meaning that females are born with a set number of primary oocytes and we can't make any more. Now this primary oocyte will undergo a certain amount of growth before it arrests at birth, right? And then childhood, this is still it's arrested in this phase, right? And then with the onset of puberty, when we have increased amounts of FSH and LH, all of the primary oocytes have the ability to begin to pick up meiosis. And so what happens is a few oocytes and follicular cells that surround them will begin developing with each reproductive cycle, each monthly cycle, but one will win out. So one primary follicle with an oocyte in the middle, one will beat out all of the others, and that one will be ovulated into the fallopian tubes for possible fertilization. So here's our primary oocyte. It undergoes meiosis. Undergoes meiosis 1, and you can see that here after meiosis 1 we have a secondary oocyte, but then we have this little polar body, and there's the size discrepancy. The reason why is we have to split off those excess chromosomes because our resulting cell, if we want a viable zygote to develop into a fetus, it has to be a haploid cell. So we have to split off chromosomes, but we don't want to distribute the cytoplasm and all the good stuff inside of the cell evenly, because the sperm cells, if you remember the structure of a sperm cell, the head of the sperm cell contains an acrosome and pretty much chromosomes, and that's it, half the number of chromosomes. Very little to no cytoplasm, right? Very little cytoplasm. And so in order for the rapid cell divisions that have to take place as soon as the sperm cell fertilizes an oocyte, we have to have abundant cytoplasm, abundant organelles, abundant nutrients, all of this stuff contained within the oocyte. And the oocyte can be real large and heavy and contain all the goodies because it doesn't have to travel very far. It stays within the female reproductive system. But the sperm, however, have to travel throughout the male reproductive system as well as throughout the vaginal canal, uterus, and into the fallopian tubes of the female reproductive system. So they want to be super small and lightweight, aerodynamic, but we can have the oocyte can contain lots of stuff, and it can be real big and slow. It doesn't go very far. So this polar body it can undergo meiosis too, but a lot of times it will just degenerate and go away. Now we have a viable secondary oocyte that contains almost all of the cytoplasm. This secondary oocyte will only undergo meiosis 2 if it is fertilized with the sperm. So you can see the sperm penetrating the secondary oocyte. And then at that time, this oocyte undergoes meiosis 2. And then we have our fertilized zygote, which will undergo rapid division, cellular divisions, and it splits off a polar body to get rid of the excess chromosomes. So meiosis 2 only takes place if the sperm fertilizes the secondary oocyte. Okay? This is just showing you oogenesis again, and it's showing you how it takes place. So this would be an ovary. Here's the fimbriae of the fallopian tubes, and these fimbriae act as they do a wave-like motion, which helps suck up this oocyte when ovulated to get it to go into the fallopian tube so that it can be fertilized. And here's the fallopian tubes, uterine tubes, or ovarian tubes, or oviducts. Any of those terms would be correct. And when you look at the ovary, you can see that there are two major portions. There's this outer cortex, which is where you see all of the developing follicles with their oocytes. And then this inner area, which is the medulla, which is primarily a loose areolar connective tissue with all of the lymphatic vessels, blood vessels, and nerves. So it has two major regions, a cortex and the medulla, and this outer region, the cortex, this is where you're going to find all of the developing follicles.